Hi, I'm Jan Foreman. Welcome to Daily Hope. Our reading today in Jeremiah 27 gives us an important setting for Jeremiah's message. The Lord's people had already suffered greatly under Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. Now, under their previous kings, Nebuchadnezzar had attacked and carried off many notable citizens of Judah. He also grabbed holy articles from the temple, adding insult to injury. So the people were traumatized and no doubt saw Babylon as the tyrant. But what is God's perspective? This is a merciful seam between the previous judgments and the next round of God's discipline. Like a compassionate parent, God gives clear direction with clear consequences for obeying Him or not. But sometimes we, like God's kids, don't want to hear what God has planned and what He wants. So God uses here a useful tool, a visual, to further illustrate His message so His people will understand. It's a yoke. In verse 2, make a yoke out of straps and crossbars and put it on your neck. This is an unfamiliar tool for us today, but Jeremiah's listeners knew its meaning well. A yoke is used to subject large animals to serve the farmer or master. It wasn't necessarily cruel, but it did curtail the freedom of the animal. It dictated where and when the animal would go. It was a symbol of humility and yielding my will to the control of another. Now, here's the message of the yoke in verse 8. If any nation will bow its neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon and serve him, I will let that nation remain in its own land to till it and to live there, declares the Lord. So Jeremiah is giving these pillaged nations and Judah a reprieve from judgment if they will humbly surrender to King Nebuchadnezzar. We have an expression, just cry uncle. I give up. But look at the audience for this merciful word. Send word to the kings of Edom, Moab, Ammon, Tyre, Sidon, and to Zedekiah, king of Judah. These folks were political leaders. They were large and in charge, and they were used to being in control and not serving. So this was a hard message. Take the yoke of the king who just pillaged your land and carried off your friends. How could a just God be asking them to submit to this godless king who just abused their people? Impossible. Talk about a politically incorrect message. But listen to the Lord's explanation in verse 4. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Tell this to your masters. With my great power and outstretched arm, I made the earth and its people and the animals that are in it. I give it to anyone I please, and now I will hand over all your countries to my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. You think you're in charge? Hardly. God is still the all-powerful maker who gives his authority as he pleases. Your reign, in other words, was given and it can be taken away. And yes, God is using this pagan king to teach his kids a lesson in obeying him. Because for decades, the people of God have not served him. They have resisted God's gentle yoke. And so now they're going to have to bear the yoke of this godless ruler to learn humility and surrender once again. And if they won't listen, disasters foretold. Of course, there are always other voices to tell us what we want to hear, the false prophets, and sadly, don't we have a tendency to listen to those comfortable words rather than hard commands from God? But the consequence of listening to those false voices is horrific. We were recently at a rocky beach where no swimming signs were posted everywhere, and a passerby told us the tragic story of a father who ignored those signs, went out swimming, and drowned. God doesn't plan disaster for us, but he does give us words of warning that we don't always want to hear, like submit and serve a difficult boss, or treat a rude neighbor with kindness, or bless that person who slandered you. We aren't really surrendering like a doormat to these people, but our surrender is to the Lord, who first asks for our cooperation. And when we trust his guidance, we can discover his yoke. Jesus put it this way in Matthew 11, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And I hope to see you tomorrow at our services at 8:45, 10:45, and 6 p.m. or join us online. God bless you.